Tycoon invites his mistress to the mansion. Unaware his ex-wife and triplets were already there, the sun was setting behind the hills of Giala province, bathing the sprawling countryside in golden light. The wind swept gently through the trees, rustling the long grass that lined the road leading to the grand estate. From afar, the mansion stood like a forgotten crown, majestic but silent, burdened by the weight of memories sealed behind marble walls and iron gates. Kong Minho sat in the back seat of his black limousine, gazing through the window as the familiar shape of the mansion grew nearer. He hadn't seen it in 5 years. 5 long years since he walked out of that house and never looked back. His jaw was tight, eyes sharp, and despite the sharp-tailored suit and polished shoes, his soul was tired. Beside him, Ju Nare leaned closer, her arms slipping into his. Her perfume filled the space. Expensive, floral, intoxicating. "This is it?" she asked, smiling at the sight of the towering gates opening before them. "Your kingdom." Minho didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained on the house. Something stirred in his chest, a whisper of a life he once lived here. The echo of laughter, the scent of warm rice porridge in the morning, and the soft murmur of a woman's voice humming in the garden. He pushed it all aside. "I built this place with my bare hands," he said flatly. "Every inch of it." Nare chuckled, oblivious. "Well, I can't wait to see it. I'm already imagining myself at the piano in the great hall, maybe a little party on the terrace." The car came to a stop. A butler opened the door, bowing deeply. Minho stepped out first, then offered his hand to Nare like a gentleman. Cameras from a distance flashed as paparazzi, having caught wind of their return, took shots of Korea's most elusive tycoon with his dazzling new companion. But inside Minho's chest, the past was awakening, like a ghost who had waited patiently for him to return. As they walked through the grand doors, the house seemed almost frozen in time. Chandeliers sparkled above, and polished floors reflected their silhouettes. But something was different. The air was warmer. There were signs of life. Shoes, small shoes, sat neatly by the door. Children's drawings taped on a wall near the staircase. Minho's steps slowed, his brow furrowed. "Who's been here?" he asked aloud, mostly to himself. The butler hesitated. He opened his mouth, then quickly closed it. Nare didn't notice anything strange. She was too mesmerized by the decor. Minho moved deeper into the house. Every painting, every piece of furniture screamed of Sujin's touch. She was the one who chose the colors, the textures, even the scent of lavender that still lingered in the halls. He had expected a cold shell, but the house was warm, lived in. And then a sound. Laughter. Children's laughter. Minho froze. His eyes darted toward the back of the house. The garden. He followed the sound, heart thudding, his pace quickening. Outside, the sun was nearly gone, but in the soft glow of twilight, 3 boys chased each other across the grass. Identical, lively, no older than 5. Their giggles floated through the air as they ran with kites and threw leaves at each other. Minho stepped out slowly, like a man stepping into a dream he didn't recognize. His breath caught in his throat. "Hyun, Jiho, don't go too far," came a woman's voice, warm, firm, familiar. Minho turned toward the voice, and there she was, Han Sujin, standing beneath the apricot tree, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, her long dark hair tied back. She looked up and their eyes met. Time shattered. Neither moved, neither spoke. She blinked once, and the children looked toward the house. One of them ran to her and grabbed her hand, tugging gently. "Yama, who is that man?" Sujin crouched down and pulled the boy closer to her, whispering something in his ear. He nodded and returned to his brothers. Minho stepped forward. "Sujin." Her name fell from his lips like a confession. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him, eyes heavy with history. "You weren't supposed to come back," she said softly. "I didn't know you were still here," he murmured. "No one told me." She turned away and began collecting the children's jackets. "You didn't ask." Minho's chest tightened. Her voice hadn't changed. Still calm, still gentle, but now cold in its distance. He looked again at the children, their faces, their hair, their eyes, those unmistakable eyes. Are they? She didn't let him finish. Come inside, she said, her back still turned. They shouldn't be out too long. It's getting cold. And with that, she walked into the house, the three boys trailing behind her. Minho remained frozen in the garden, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. He had returned to claim his new life, but instead he had walked into the ruins of the old one. A life he thought he'd buried. But the past wasn't buried. It was alive, and it had his eyes. Você diz. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como seu faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoção. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o ChatGPT diz. The heavy wooden door closed, behind her with a soft thud, and silence settled inside the hallway like a familiar weight. Han Sujin stood still for a moment, her back pressed against the door, her arms wrapped around the small frame of her youngest son who had fallen asleep in her arms. Her eyes slowly lifted toward the grand chandelier above, the same one that had lit her wedding night, now casting shadows across a life she no longer recognized. She whispered, gently, "Shoo, Minacio is sleeping." And her other two boys immediately quieted their giggles. They were used to this routine, a life lived in whispers and careful steps, always hidden behind the curtain of the main house's silence. She moved through the inner corridor toward the old servants' quarters, a wing Minho never visited. That was where she had made her home. It wasn't grand, it wasn't beautiful, but it was safe. It was hers. Their small space was neat, humble, a shelf of picture books, a wooden table with 3 tiny chairs. Hand-sewn curtains fluttered in the breeze of a cracked window. On one corner of the wall, a calendar marked every doctor's appointment, every school event, written in careful, rounded handwriting. Everything was for them. She laid Minacio down on a small mattress, covered him with a faded blanket, and gently kissed his forehead. Then she turned to her other 2 sons and knelt beside them. "Did you say hello properly to the man?" she asked softly. Hyun, the eldest, frowned. "Who is he, Yama? Why did he look at us like that?" Jiho, always curious, tilted his head. "He has our eyes." Sujin's throat tightened. She looked away quickly. "He's someone I used to know. But why did he look so surprised?" Jiho asked. She gave them both a tired smile. "Because he thought this house was empty. But we're still here, aren't we?" Hyun nodded proudly. "We've always been here. You never left." Sujin brushed his hair back gently. "That's right. I never left." The truth was, she had nowhere to go. When Minho left 5 years ago, it wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of her exile. Her name had been erased from every account. Her calls were ignored. And though the divorce papers had come, she never signed them. Not because she believed he would come back, but because she wanted to remember who she once was. The woman who once stood beside a man who promised forever. After the scandal, after the rumors, she had retreated into the last place where she had control. The West Wing, abandoned and forgotten. The staff was instructed never to speak to her, yet a few loyal souls helped quietly. The old cook, Mrs. Kim, would leave groceries at the back door. A gardener once gave her blankets. And slowly, a quiet, hidden life began to grow. She raised the boys in shadows, but with love. Always with love. Sometimes, at night, she would sit alone and remember the man she married. The young, hungry Kong Min-ho, who brought her roses from the street market and said things like, "When I have the world, you'll sit on top of it with me." And for a time, she believed him. But the world came and it changed him. She remembered the night it all broke. It wasn't loud. No slamming doors. No screaming. Just a dinner left cold on the table and a phone call from a lawyer hours later. "He wants to be free," the voice had said. "He's moving on." Just like that. And even then, even when the ground collapsed beneath her, she didn't leave. She couldn't. She was already 3 months pregnant with children who would soon need everything. And she had nothing. She kept the pregnancy to herself, hid the morning sickness, did her own prenatal checkups. And when the time came, she gave birth in a small clinic under a different name, paying with what little she had left. No one knew. And she returned to the only place that still had a roof over her head. Here, to the mansion that had once been her palace, and became her prison. A knock at the door startled her. She rose, cautious. It was Mrs. Kim, the old housekeeper, holding a basket of fruit and milk. She offered a weary smile. "I saw the mistress came back," she said quietly, with her red lipstick and fancy bags. Sujin took the basket with both hands, bowing slightly. "Thank you. You didn't have to." "I did," Mrs. Kim interrupted, glancing at the sleeping boys. "You're still the lady of this house in my heart." Sujin lowered her gaze. "They're saying the chairman returned for good," Mrs. Kim continued. "That he's going to sell the Seoul Tower and focus on domestic affairs now." Sujin froze. That wasn't part of the plan. She had endured all these years because she believed he would never come back, that the mansion was forgotten. But now he was here, and she had no idea what that meant. Mrs. Kim reached out and gently touched Sujin's arm. "Be careful, child. Time doesn't always heal. Sometimes it reopens things we buried too deep." When the woman left, Sujin returned to her chair by the window, clutching a small photograph she kept in her drawer. It was the only one left. Faded, cracked, worn by too many tears. It was her wedding photo. Minho in a white suit. Her, in a simple lace dress, smiling shyly. Before the world changed. Before ambition devoured love. Before silence replaced words. She stared at it for a long while, then whispered to the air, "You weren't supposed to come back," but he had. And now everything she had protected, the boys, their peace, their innocence, was in danger. He had tried, but his mind refused peace. He stood alone in the study, the one room in the house that hadn't changed. His fingers brushed against the edge of the desk he once ruled over. This was where he signed his first major acquisition, where he fired his closest friend for betrayal, where he, one evening, handed Sujin a document he never thought he'd regret delivering. Divorce papers. His hand clenched unconsciously. A glass of untouched whiskey sat beside him. The ticking of the antique clock on the shelf grew louder with each second, as if mocking his discomfort. Then it came again, that sound. Laughter. Faint, but unmistakable. He moved to the window and looked out toward the back garden. There they were, even at this hour, 2 of the boys holding flashlights, pretending to be explorers. The third lay curled up near the flower bed, sound asleep under a blanket, guarded by the older 2. It made no sense. Why were they here? Why were they here? He turned from the window, stormed out of the study, and moved through the darkened halls. His footsteps were quiet, deliberate. Years of power had taught him to walk without echo. But this wasn't the boardroom. This was his home. Or was it still? He reached the west wing. It had once belonged to servants. No one lived there now, at least not officially. Minho hesitated, his hand resting on the doorframe. He remembered this part of the house being cold and unused. Yet now he could smell rice, a soft hint of sesame oil, the scent of home-cooked food, something rich with memory. He stepped closer. A faint light shone from under the door. And voices, small, innocent ones. "Iyama said we have to be quiet," one of the boys whispered. "But I'm hungry," another pouted. "Do we still have the honey bread?" "Yes, but you have to share." Minho's breath caught in his chest. He reached for the doorknob but stopped. He didn't know why. He backed away and returned to the hallway, walking faster now. His mind was reeling. Could it be? The boy's eyes. The way the smallest one had looked up at him. He needed to know. He had to confront her. The next morning arrived with cold sunlight and a wind that smelled like winter was trying to come early. Sujin was outside, hanging laundry on the line in the garden, when she heard his voice. Sujin. She didn't turn around. Her hands continued working, pinning a small pair of pants beside a t-shirt marked with childlike paint stains. I need to speak with you, Minho said, more forcefully. She finally looked at him. Her face was calm, unnervingly so. It wasn't passive. It was controlled. A woman who had learned to survive pain by never letting it show. What is it? She asked. His throat tightened. Those boys, he began. They're yours. Her jaw tightened just barely. She nodded. Yes. And the father? She looked directly into his eyes. You. It hit him like a wave, cold, vast, and impossible to fight. He staggered back a step, mouth parted slightly. You never told me. You never asked. I would've, he started, but she cut him off. You would've what, Minho? Her voice trembled, just for a second. Stayed? Loved me again? Cancelled the divorce you had already signed behind my back? Called off the affair that everyone in Seoul already knew about before I did? That wasn't... Don't lie to me, she said sharply. His hands shook now. I didn't know you were pregnant. No one told me. I left thinking you... He stopped. Thinking I what? She asked, stepping closer. That I was unfaithful? That I was beneath you? You left without even looking me in the eye. I thought you betrayed me. Sujin laughed bitterly. Of course you did. That's what they told you. That I was close to your business rival. That I fed him information. That I... She choked on the word. Cheated. He stared at her, speechless. I was pregnant, Minho, she whispered. When you walked out, I was carrying your sons. And I begged for one conversation. One chance to explain. But you never gave it. He looked away. Shame wrapped itself around his spine. All I had left was this house, she continued. I stayed, because it was the only place I could give them shelter. I raised them here alone, while you built empires with your mistress. His voice broke. Why didn't you tell me after they were born? Because I didn't want them to grow up thinking they were someone's shame. I didn't want to beg a man for love. I was already broken. I couldn't bear to be humiliated again. Silence. Only the wind moved, tossing a shirt on the line until it danced like a ghost between them. Finally, Minho stepped forward, his voice hoarse. They're mine. Yes. All three. She nodded once. He sank to the bench by the tree, burying his face in his hands. My God. And there it was. The truth. The cruel, brutal truth he'd been too proud to see. Years lost. Sons unheld. A woman discarded. I need time, he said. No, she replied. They need time. You had 5 years. They've had none. She turned away and walked back toward the house, her shoulders trembling, but her spine straight. He watched her go, the woman who had once waited by the window for his car to pull into the driveway, the woman who now walked with quiet fire in her chest, a mother forged in heartbreak. And for the first time since his return, Kang Minho realized he was no longer the owner of this house. Minho found himself drifting through the halls like a ghost, haunted by what he now knew. Every corner held a memory he'd forgotten or tried to forget. The piano in the music room, dusty now, where Sujin once played lullabies late into the night. The nursery they had painted together when they thought a child would come someday. The terrace where she used to wait for him with tea that always went cold before he arrived. He wandered to the garden again, needing the air. It was early morning, and the sun had barely warmed the sky. Dew still clung to the grass like tiny drops of sorrow. And then he saw them, 3 boys, seated cross-legged in a triangle on the stone path, carefully examining something in a small plastic box. They're moving, Jiho squealed. They're not bugs, said Hyun, serious as always. They're caterpillars. They'll become butterflies. Minaseo, the youngest, clapped quietly. They're green, like Iyama's dress. Minho didn't mean to step forward, but something pulled him. Maybe it was instinct, maybe guilt, Or maybe it was the overwhelming need to be near them. The moment his shoe crunched softly on the gravel, the three boys looked up, startled. Minho stopped, unsure. He had never felt this kind of fear before. Not in boardrooms. Not in mergers or hostile takeovers. This was different. Raw. Exposing. Jiho stared at him, blinking. Juicy. Hyun, older by just a few minutes but somehow carrying the weight of years, stood up slowly, as if preparing to defend. His brothers. Minho raised his hands gently. I won't hurt you. There was a long silence. Then Jiho asked, Why do you look sad? The question hit like a stone. He looked down. I think I've made a lot of mistakes. Hyun's eyes narrowed, skeptical. You were yelling at Iyama. Minho nodded. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Minesio tilted his head. Do you know our names? Minho hesitated, then knelt. I want to, he said quietly. If you'll tell me. Hyun didn't respond. Jiho did. I'm Jiho. That's Minesio. And he's Hyun. But Iyama says Hyun is the leader because he was born first. Hyun rolled his eyes. By 2 minutes. Minho's lips lifted slightly, a smile hesitant, aching. I like your names, he said. They're strong. Jiho came closer, squinting up at him. Did you come back because of us? I didn't know you were here. Minesio blinked. You forgot Iyama? No, Minho said immediately. I never forgot her. I was wrong. He looked at the three of them, their faces, their eyes, the same ones he saw in the mirror every morning, though theirs were clearer, purer, not clouded with ambition or fear or pride. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small origami figure, a crane. He unfolded and folded it again nervously in his hands. When I was your age, he said, I used to make these. My mother taught me. She said if you made 1,000, your wish would come true. Minesio's eyes widened. Did it? Minho stared at the paper bird, fingers trembling. No, he whispered, because I wished for the wrong thing. There was another pause. Then, quietly, Jiho asked, Do you want to play with us? Hyun looked alarmed. Iyama said we shouldn't talk to strangers. I'm not a stranger, Jiho replied. He's sad. Minho exhaled shakily, overwhelmed. He had spent years surrounded by men who feared him, bowed to him, chased his shadow, but never once had he felt as small or as seen, as in this moment, kneeling before 3 children who didn't know how much he had already taken from them. Before he could answer, a voice rang out from the porch. Boys, breakfast. Sujin. The children leapt up and ran toward her voice, but Jiho turned halfway and looked back. Do you like honey bread? Juicy? Minho managed a nod. Then come tomorrow morning. We have extra. And just like that, they were gone. He stayed kneeling in the garden, his hands still holding the paper crane. The wind nudged at his coat. His heart ached. He didn't deserve their kindness, but they didn't know that yet. Inside the house, Sujin watched everything from the window. Her eyes were unreadable. She saw the way Minho had looked at the boys, not with calculation, not even with regret, with longing. But longing wasn't love, and love wasn't enough to fix 5 years of silence. Still, when Jiho whispered in her ear, We invited him for honey bread, she didn't scold him. But today the dough felt heavier. Her fingers trembled slightly. Behind her, tiny feet padded across the floor. Iyama, Minaso yawned, dragging his blanket behind him. Is the bread ready? Almost, she said gently, wiping her hands and lifting him onto the stool. You're up early. He leaned his head against her shoulder. I wanted to help. She kissed his temple. Then help me watch the oven. Okay? The other boys came shortly after, half asleep but already squabbling over whose turn it was to set the table. As Sujin moved between them, setting cups and pouring warm milk, there was a sudden knock at the door. A beat, then another. Sujin froze, her hand still around the handle of the kettle. She didn't need to ask who it was. She knew. The boys looked up, expectant. A juicy came, Jiho said, hopping off his chair. Wait, Sujin called, too late. Jiho had already opened the door. There he stood, Kang Min-ho. He looked different this morning, not like a stranger in an expensive coat. Today he wore a soft gray sweater, no tie, no guard. His eyes were tired, but quieter, like someone who had stayed up all night talking to ghosts. Good morning, he said, his voice low. Jiho beamed. You came. You invited me, didn't you? Come in, come in. We're having honey bread. Sujin stepped into the doorway then, her apron stained with flour. Her eyes met his. She didn't speak, but he understood. I won't stay long, he said softly. I didn't want to break my promise. Hyun watched them both carefully. Then, as if granting silent permission, he moved aside and gestured toward the table. Min-ho walked in slowly, his hands at his sides. Everything in this room was so small, chairs, spoons, mugs, but it felt heavier than any boardroom he had ever entered. The boys returned to their seats. Sujin placed the warm bread in the center. The honey glistened under the morning light. He sat down, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Minesio, the youngest, offered him the first slice. Iyama says we always share, he said, tilting his head. Do you want the corner or the middle? Minho's voice broke just a little. The corner is perfect. As he took the bread, his fingers brushed against Minesio's tiny hand. It shook him more than it should have. They ate in silence at first, awkward, tender silence. But then Jiho began telling a story about a lizard he had once tried to keep as a pet, and Minesio interrupted with a dream he had about flying rabbits. And Hyun corrected them both with the authority of an older brother. Laughter began to fill the room. Slowly, carefully, Minho didn't laugh. Not at first. But then something inside him cracked, and he let out a soft chuckle when Minesio tried to pour milk and accidentally soaked the tablecloth. Sujin moved quickly to clean it. Her hand passed close to his. He didn't reach for it, but his eyes followed her. When the boys ran off to play in the next room, their voices echoing through the walls, only the two of them remained at the table. Sujin poured him another cup of tea. He took it, murmuring, "Thank you." She sat down across from him, the heat of the mug warming her palms. "You don't have to keep coming," she said quietly. "You're not obligated. I know." He looked down at the slice of bread he hadn't touched. "But I want to." She didn't answer. Her eyes focused on the steam rising from the tea. "They don't know what you did," she said finally. "They don't know the things you said to me, how you left. I don't expect you to explain it to them," he replied. "I don't expect them to forgive me either. Then why are you here?" He lifted his gaze to hers, and for the first time, there were tears there. Real ones. Not performative. Not forced. Just quiet. "Because I'm trying to remember what it means to love something I didn't earn. To be near something I already lost." Sujin looked away. Her hands trembled slightly around the cup. "I can't give you anything back," she said, voice cracking. "I don't have it in me anymore." "I'm not here to take," he said. "I came to see them, and to look at you without lies in the way." Outside, the boys were laughing again, chasing each other through the garden. "I used to wait for you," she whispered. "Every night. I made dinner for two. I kept lights on. I believed you'd walk back through that door and say it was all a mistake." Minho's throat tightened. "I saw your name on tabloids," she continued. "Your new love, your new life. I saw it all, and I buried what was left of mine." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice hoarse. "I was a coward. I believed a lie because it made leaving easier. And by the time I knew the truth, I had already told the world I didn't love you anymore." Tears slid down her cheeks now, silent, stubborn. "You said nothing. You let me disappear. I hated myself more than I ever hated you," he said. "That's why I buried you. Because facing you meant facing what I destroyed." They sat like that, in the quiet heartbreak of all that remained unspoken for too long. Then, faintly, from the next room, "Iyama, a juicy." We made a fort. Come see. Sujin stood slowly. I'll make more bread, she said. You can come again tomorrow. She didn't look at him as she walked away. Minho stood outside, near the edge of the garden, staring at the flickering lights through the window of the west wing. That corner of the mansion had always been a place he never paid attention to. Now it was the only part that seemed alive. His hands were in his pockets, the collar of his coat turned up against the crisp evening wind. He should have left after breakfast. That's what he told himself. But every step toward the car had felt wrong. Every inch he tried to retreat was weighed down by the image of Jiho offering him bread, or the way Sujin's voice cracked when she said she had waited for him. He had always been in control until now. Behind him, the sound of heels clicking across stone startled him. He turned. Ju Nare stood a few steps away, her expression unreadable. Her lipstick was immaculate, her coat designer, and her arms crossed with the kind of elegance only perfected by women who refused to be dismissed. So, she said after a long silence, this is why you've been disappearing. Minho sighed. Nare, I woke up and you were gone, she continued, walking closer, each step deliberate. No note, no call. I had to ask the staff where you were. Imagine my surprise when they said you were in the garden of the West Wing. Minho didn't respond. He simply turned away again, eyes back on the glowing window where shadows moved inside Sujin, probably folding laundry, maybe checking on the boys. The ordinary beauty of a life he had abandoned. Nare's voice dropped an octave. Are you seriously going to pretend this is normal? No, he said quietly. It's not. I saw her, Nare said. Earlier, she was in the market, wearing old jeans and holding a grocery bag like she's not living under the same roof as one of the richest men in the country. Minho's hands clenched. She's raising your children, Nare continued, her voice sharper now. In your house, secretly, while the world thinks you moved on and married someone younger and shinier. He turned to face her fully. That wasn't her choice. That was mine. Nare scoffed. So what now? Are you planning on playing house with your little ghosts? Build sandcastles in the garden and hope everyone forgets you left her without a word. Minho's voice was lower, quieter, but heavier than before. They're not ghosts. They're my sons. Nare flinched slightly at that. He didn't stop. They laugh like her. They fight like me. They make forts out of pillows and tell stories about flying rabbits. And I wasn't there for any of it. Nare blinked, then looked away. So what? You're just gonna walk back into that life? Pretend none of this happened? Pretend I don't exist? Minho exhaled. I'm not pretending anything. I need to fix what I broke. And what about me, Minho? Her voice cracked now, emotion rising through the cracks in her polished armor. What about the years I gave you? The dinners, the interviews, the lies I told to protect your image? I stood by you when the tabloids were vicious. I cleaned up your messes. I covered your silence. Was I just a placeholder? His silence was louder than a scream. Nare stepped closer. Tell me. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't love me. Minho did. He looked her in the eye, and that hurt more than any answer. Love, he said slowly, is not what I thought it was. Nare's face twisted. Pain, disbelief, and fury all warring at once. You're pathetic, she whispered. You think you're noble for chasing after a woman who wants nothing to do with you? Who's raised your kids without asking for a single favor? You don't love her. You feel guilty. That's not the same thing. She turned on her heel, but before she walked away, she said over her shoulder, just know, the world won't forgive you as easily as she might. Then she disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the sound of her heels fading into the night. Minho didn't chase her. He stood there in the dark, staring up at the house he once claimed as his empire. But now it was no longer his kingdom. It belonged to the children who lived in it, to the woman who protected them, to the past he tried to erase and failed. Inside the West Wing, Sujin sat by the window, the curtain barely parted. She had seen it all. Nare's arrival, the argument, The way Minho didn't raise his voice, but didn't flinch either. She closed the curtain softly. Sujin sat at the edge of her bed, brushing Minasio's hair as he sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching his favorite stuffed bear. She had barely slept. Her mind kept drifting back to the garden, to the way Minho had looked at her, then at Nare, then back at the house like he no longer knew which world he belonged to. She didn't want to ask herself what it meant. Not yet. Behind her, Hyun and Jiho were drawing pictures on the floor with colored pencils. One of them was a sketch of the mansion. The other, a picture of a tall man holding hands with 3 boys. She swallowed hard. "Iyama?" Hyun asked without looking up. "Is the Ajusi coming again today?" "I don't know," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I hope he does," Jiho said, flipping his drawing around to show her. "He said he used to build buildings. I want to build something too." Sujin looked at the drawing, a crooked tower beside stick figures of the boys. Next to it, she saw a 4th figure, a man. His head was square and his smile uneven, but the eyes were familiar. She reached out and gently touched the paper. Her heart ached in a way she had taught herself to ignore, but the ache was louder now. She was still staring at the picture when a knock came from the main hallway. She stood quickly, her heart jumping despite herself. It wasn't the soft, casual knock of Minho. It was quicker, sharper. Sujin stepped out of the room, closing the door behind her, and walked barefoot down the narrow hall to the entrance. When she opened the door, she froze. Standing there, an umbrella in hand and eyes narrow with scrutiny, was Nare. Her makeup was flawless despite the rain, her heels pristine. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, shaking off droplets like a cat. "You've been busy," Nare said, her voice calm but cold. "Hiding a whole family in the servants' wing. Impressive." Sujin closed the door slowly and stood still. "You shouldn't be here." "No," Nare agreed, turning to face her. "I shouldn't, but neither should you." Sujin didn't flinch. "This is my home." Nare gave a sharp laugh. "It was your home, until he left you, until you disappeared. You don't get to haunt this place like a ghost and then act like you never left." "I never did leave," Sujin said softly. "He left me." Nare's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "He's confused right now," she said. "He thinks guilt is love. He thinks you represent something he lost. But he'll remember. He always does. He remembers power. He remembers ambition. And I gave him both." Sujin stared at her. "You came here to scare me?" "I came here to warn you," Nare replied, stepping closer. "You don't belong in his world anymore. You never did. You're a relic of a time he's trying to erase. If you care about him, you'll let him go." Sujin's jaw tensed. "If I didn't belong in his world, I never would have been the one holding him up when he had nothing." Nare blinked. "I held his hand when he had no name," Sujin continued, voice shaking now. "I stitched his shirts, I brought water to his meetings. I listened to every speech he rehearsed in front of the mirror. He built his empire standing on the ground I kept from collapsing beneath him." Nare was silent. "And when he turned his back on me," Sujin whispered, "I didn't chase him. I didn't beg. Not because I didn't love him, but because I loved myself more." "You sound noble," Nare said coldly. "But nobility doesn't win. Money does. Reputation does. And you have neither." Sujin took a breath, slow and deep, and opened the door. "You should leave." Nare didn't move. "I won't let you take him from me," she said finally, her voice sharp with something darker. "You think this is about love, but it's not. This is about territory, and you're on mine." Sujin's eyes didn't waver. "Then maybe it's time you realized he was never yours." Nare's nostrils flared. Her hand tightened on the handle of the umbrella, and then a voice came from behind. "Mom!" They both turned. Jiho stood there, clutching his drawing. "I made this for Ajusi," he said, glancing curiously at Nare. Nare's mouth parted slightly, surprise and discomfort flickering on her face. Sujin walked over and knelt beside her son. Thank you, she whispered. Why don't you go back to your brothers, Jiho nodded and ran off. Nare stared at the hallway where the boy had disappeared, the truth crashing around her like rain against glass. There was no version of this where she won easily. No version of this where Sujin was just a quiet memory. She was still here. She had roots, blood, and a kind of quiet strength Nare hadn't accounted for. Without another word, Nare walked out into the storm, her umbrella opening with a sharp snap. She didn't look back, and Sujin didn't watch her go. She only leaned against the door, heart pounding, eyes closed. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, her sons laughed. Minho sat alone in the formal dining room, the one that hadn't been used in years. The chandelier above him flickered faintly, reflecting in his untouched glass of water. His phone lay silent beside his hand, screen dark. No messages, no calls. He stared at the place settings. 10 chairs, polished plates, expensive crystal. When had this room last hosted laughter? Or warmth? He had wealth. He had legacy, but none of it sat with him now. He closed his eyes, leaning back in the chair, when the door opened quietly. It was Sujin. Her hair was damp from the rain. She didn't speak right away. She simply stood in the doorway, holding a familiar drawing, Jiho's, the one with the 4 figures. Minho's eyes fell on it, and he stood slowly. I heard, she said softly. Nare came. He nodded once, shame tightening across his chest. I didn't ask her to. I know. A silence stretched between them. She stepped further into the room, her bare feet soundless against the floor. She doesn't understand, Sujin murmured. This house isn't yours because of money, and it isn't mine because I stayed. It belongs to them now, to the children, and they don't know how to protect themselves from this storm. I'm trying to shield them, he said. I didn't mean for them to be dragged into this? She cut in gently. They already were, the moment you returned. Minho lowered his gaze. She came closer and set the drawing on the table, smoothing it with one hand. You looked at them, she whispered, like you were seeing ghosts. I thought I was. And now, he looked up, his eyes rimmed red. Now I see myself. There was such rawness in his voice that it made her breath catch. Jiho told me, she said, swallowing, that you said you were building something once. Towers, cities, a kingdom. He gave a bitter smile. And now, she looked at him. And now you're standing in ruins. The words weren't cruel. They were true. And he didn't flinch. I didn't just leave you, he said. I erased you. I signed my name to every piece of your silence. She blinked back, the tears threatening to fall. I lived inside that silence. Every single day. He took a step forward. Then let me give them something else. Let me be present. For how long? She asked, voice breaking. Until the guilt fades? Until Nare demands you return to her world? Until this becomes too uncomfortable for you? No, he said. Until they know me. Until they stop calling me Ajusi. Until they ask me where I go when I leave. And I can answer honestly. Nowhere without you. Tears slid down her cheeks now. Minho, she whispered. He stepped closer, but didn't reach for her. I can't erase what I did, he said. But I can build again. If not with you, then at least for them. She nodded slowly, but her eyes were tired. Don't promise what you can't keep, she said. They've already learned what absence sounds like. He looked at the drawing again, at the crooked figures holding hands. I don't want to be a drawing, he said. I want to be real to them. She studied him. Then, after a long moment, she said, tomorrow morning, they'll be at the school gate. Jiho forgot his scarf. You can bring it to him. Minho looked at her, breath caught. You'll let me? It's not about what I let you do anymore, she said. It's about whether you show up, whether you stay when it rains. Her voice trembled. That's what fathers do. They stay, even when it storms. Minho's throat burned. He could only nod. Sujin turned, walking away with slow, steady steps. But just before she reached the door, she stopped. Without turning around, she said, "They call you a juicy now. But one day, if you prove it, they might call you Appa." And then she was gone. The chandelier above him flickered again, casting shadows across the untouched plates. Minho sat back down, pressing a hand to his chest. It was the first time in years he realized restlessness. Hope, perhaps. He watched as Sujin helped the boys into their small coats near the car. Minacio was still rubbing his eyes. Hyun was inspecting his lunchbox to make sure no one stole his grapes. Jiho was bouncing from one foot to the other, already humming a song about turtles and spaceships. And then Jiho froze. His eyes locked onto the figure standing near the stone steps. "A juicy." Minho walked forward slowly, holding out the scarf. "You forgot this." Jiho grinned and ran to him. "I knew I left it. Yama always says I lose everything." Minho crouched down, gently wrapping the scarf around the boy's neck. "There," he said. "Warm. Super warm." Jiho beamed. Sujin watched silently, keys in her hand. She didn't interrupt. Minho stood and looked at her. She gave a small nod, not of approval, not yet, but permission. "I'll take them," he said. "To school." Jiho cheered. "Can he, Yama?" "Please." Minacio echoed. "Please." Sujin's voice was soft. "Just today." Minho opened the car door, helping them in like he'd done it 100 times, though this was his first. He moved carefully, but there was lightness in his movements, like he was stepping into something sacred, fragile. On the drive, the boys talked over each other, asking him what kind of car he drove, if he liked dinosaurs, if he ever played video games. Minho answered every question, truthfully, gently. When they reached the school gate, Jiho tugged at his coat. "Are you gonna pick us up too?" Minho hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I'll be here." All three ran toward the gate, turning back just once to wave. And in that moment, something strange happened inside him. He felt seen, not as a chairman, not as a man who built empires, but as someone who mattered to 3 small hearts. But peace is always temporary, especially in houses built on secrets. By the time Minho returned to the mansion, the air had shifted. Mrs. Kim met him at the door, her face pale, hands shaking slightly. "There's someone asking for you, sir." "In the sitting room." Minho frowned. "Who?" She hesitated. "He says he's from the Herald, the business section." He walked down the hall with a sinking feeling, each step heavier than the last. Inside the sitting room, a thin man in glasses stood browsing a shelf of books. He turned quickly when Minho entered. "Chairman Kong." The man greeted with a shallow bow. "It's a pleasure. I'm Yoon Sang-hoon, investigative journalist. I didn't schedule, because I thought winning meant walking alone," he said. "But I see it now. I didn't build an empire. I built a prison." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. "And what now? You chase after her? After the children who barely know your name? What's left for you in that life?" "Redemption," he said quietly. "A second chance. If not with her, then with them." Nare shook her head. "You'll lose everything. They'll crucify you in the media. Investors will pull out. Your name will fall." Minho looked out the window, then let it fall. She stared at him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. And perhaps she didn't, because he had changed. Not all at once, not cleanly, but in the quiet, in the garden, at the breakfast table, in the echo of small feet running through old halls. She turned to leave, then paused. "If you walk away from this world, you'll never come back." "I know," he said. She left without another word, and he stood there alone. But this time he chose it. That night he drove out of the city, past the lights, past the signs, past everything that had once mattered to him. He didn't call Sujin. He didn't send a driver. He didn't ask anyone for help. He just drove, silently, steadily, until dawn broke and the road opened wide before him. He didn't know where they'd gone, but he would find them, not to drag them back. He stepped out slowly, heart hammering in his chest. The scarf Jiho had left behind was still draped over the passenger seat beside him. He hadn't had the heart to remove it. It smelled faintly of cinnamon, crayons, and the sweetness of childhood. He didn't know if they would be here. He didn't know if she would let him see them again. He didn't even know if he had the right to ask. But still, he came. He walked to the front gate and peered through the bars. Children ran across the courtyard in flashes of color, backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. Laughter rang in the air like wind chimes. And then a familiar giggle, quick footsteps. Jiho. Minho's breath caught. The boy was running with a paper plane in his hand, chased by Min Seo, who wore a mismatched pair of gloves. Behind them came Hyun, holding a book like it was a shield, scolding them both. Minho stepped back instinctively, suddenly unsure if he should be seen. But Jiho looked up, stopped. His little face lit up instantly. Ah, juicy! Minho froze. Jiho bolted toward the gate. Yama! He came. He really came. Behind him, Sujin emerged from the doorway, her hand resting lightly on Min Seo's shoulder. Her eyes found Minho's. There was no anger, no surprise, only a quiet, unreadable expression that made his chest ache. He approached slowly, step by step, never breaking eye contact. I didn't know where else to go, he said, voice trembling. I thought, maybe you'd be here. You thought right, she replied simply. Jiho reached through the gate and grabbed his hand. Did you bring more of those paper birds? Minho smiled faintly, eyes still on Sujin. No, but I brought something else. He knelt and reached into his coat, pulling out a small wooden box. Inside were 3 small wristbands, plain leather, hand-stitched. On each one was a name, Hyun, Jiho, Min Seo. He handed the box to Jiho. What is it? The boy asked, curious. Just something to remind you that I'm not leaving again. Even if you can't see me every day, I'll still be here. He looked at Hyun. Always. Hyun examined his wristband in silence, then looked up at his mother. She gave a small nod. Jiho slipped his on immediately. It's like armor, he shouted proudly, showing it off to his friends. Min Seo followed suit, beaming. Only Hyun remained quiet, his eyes flickering between his brothers and Minho. Do you mean it? He asked. You're really not leaving again? Minho swallowed the lump in his throat. Not unless your mom tells me to. There was a pause. Then Hyun extended his wrist. Minho fastened the band gently. Thank you, he whispered. They sat together under the willow tree near the edge of the playground. Sujin and Minho, side by side on an old bench. The children played just out of reach, laughter painting the morning in light. She held the scarf he had kept. Her fingers brushed over the fabric, lost in thought. I didn't think you'd come this far, she said. I didn't think I'd have to, he replied, until I realized I'd never made the journey at all. Sujin turned her face toward him. Her eyes were tired, but something else lived there now. Something softer, something raw. You walked out once without a word. I don't know how to let you back in. I'm not asking you to, he said. I'm asking to earn the right to be near them. She looked back toward the boys. They already see you. I know, he whispered, and it terrifies me, because I don't want to disappoint them like I disappointed you. The wind moved gently through the branches above them. I used to think forgiveness was something you gave, she said, but it's not. It's something you choose, again and again, every day. He turned to her, his voice barely a breath. Then let me choose, even if you can't. Let me be the one who shows up. Sujin didn't answer right away, but she didn't leave either. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting golden light over the courtyard, she placed Jiho's scarf back in his lap. You'll need that, she said quietly. It gets cold out here. Minho stared at the scarf, then up at her. And in that moment, something shifted. Something healed. Not completely, not instantly, but it began. The boys had finally fallen asleep. Jiho with his hand curled around his wooden wristband. Min Seo drooling onto his pillow, mumbling about superheroes. Hyun, awake but pretending not to be, with one eye half open, watching his father. Sujin walked in with a soft towel in her hand, drying her damp hair. She paused when she saw Minho still sitting there in the mess, unmoving, almost afraid to breathe. "You can go," she whispered. "I know you don't sleep much." He didn't look up. "They didn't cry." She moved closer. "No, they didn't. I kept thinking they would," he said, voice trembling, "that they'd scream or hide from me. But instead Jiho said I was funny. Minesio offered me his cookie. And Hyun," he paused, glancing at the older boy. "Hyun said nothing, but he didn't push me away." "That's how they forgive," Sujin murmured, "without asking you to explain, without needing you to bleed for it." He finally looked at her, eyes shining. "That's more terrifying than being hated." She knelt beside him, resting her back against the couch. "They're just children," she said, pulling her knees to her chest. "They haven't learned yet that people leave." Minho's voice cracked. "But I did. I left." "Yes," she replied. "But today you stayed." The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of something else. Space. Breathing room. A fragile beginning. "I keep thinking about what Nare said," he admitted after a while. "That the world won't forgive me." "She's right," Sujin said, not unkindly. "The world doesn't forgive. It watches, it judges, it devours. But the world isn't raising your sons." He nodded slowly, pressing his palms to the floor as if grounding himself there. "I wanted to give them everything," he whispered. "But I didn't know what everything really was. I thought it meant money, opportunities, security. And now," he looked at her, "now I think it means showing up to school with a forgotten scarf, sitting on the floor with glue in my hair, hearing them laugh from another room and knowing I helped make that sound." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "And what about when it gets harder?" she asked. "When the press comes back, when people ask questions you can't answer, when the boys grow up and ask why you disappeared for 5 years. I'll answer them," he said, voice low. "Even if it shames me, even if it breaks me, I'll tell them the truth, that I was proud and wrong, that I let fear dress itself as reason." Sujin looked down at her hands. "You know, there was a time I would have begged for this," she whispered. "For you to say those words. For you to find me." Minho didn't move. He waited. She turned her face to him, and for the first time, her expression cracked. Not with anger, not with distance, but with the quiet ache of someone who had carried too much alone. "But when you didn't, I learned how to live without them." Tears slid silently down her cheek. "I became someone else, not out of choice, but survival. And now, every time I see you, I feel like that old version of me might come back." Minho reached out, slowly, gently, and rested his hand over hers. "I don't want the old you," he said. "I want the one who endured, the one who raised them, the one who lived when I didn't deserve to be part of that life." She looked at him, wide-eyed, uncertain. "I'll follow your lead," he added. "If that means staying in the shadows, I'll do it. If it means being the quiet presence at their side, I'll be that. But I won't walk away again." A breath escaped her lips. Not quite relief, not quite surrender. Just release. "Okay," she said softly. Just that one word. But it held the weight of the years between them. She stood slowly, brushing her hair back. "You should rest. We have to enroll them in the village school tomorrow." He rose, still watching her. "Can I come?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but let me speak first. They need to see me leading." "Of course," he said. As she turned to walk down the hall toward her room, Minho glanced back at the boys once more. He whispered, barely loud enough for the silence to hear, "Until that sound." Minho's body tensed. He stood immediately. Sujin froze, her spatula in midair. Another knock, firmer this time. Minho moved toward the door before she could. "No," she said quickly, wiping her hands and stepping in front of him. "Let me." He hesitated, then nodded, backing away. Sujin opened the door. 2 men in suits stood there, crisp and emotionless, the kind of presence that never brought good news. Behind them, a car idled quietly. "Ms. Han Soo-jin?" one of the men asked. "Yes, I'm Park Jae-woon, legal affairs investigator for the Department of Family and Public Welfare. We received an anonymous inquiry concerning the guardianship of 3 minors under your care. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Her heart stopped. "What inquiry?" she asked, her voice perfectly still. "I'm afraid I can't disclose the source," he replied. "But the matter is serious. There are concerns of concealment and undocumented paternity." Min-ho stepped forward now. "I'm their father." Both men turned. "Chairman Kong Min-ho," Park acknowledged. "We're aware. But as far as the state is concerned, your children have no legal registration connecting them to you. That creates complications, particularly regarding custody and identity fraud." Soo-jin's fingers curled tightly around the doorframe. "They were never hidden," she said, quiet but sharp. "They were protected. There's a difference." Park offered a small bow, polite but unmoved. "We're not here to remove them. Not yet. But you'll need to come in for a formal review. Both of you." Jiho peeked from behind the couch. "Yama? Who are those people?" Soo-jin turned quickly. "Stay inside, sweetheart." The door shut behind her. Min-ho stood with his fists clenched. "Nare did this." Park didn't react. "We only follow reports, sir. This will need to go through the courts. And until there's legal clarity, the children's travel and relocation rights will be temporarily restricted." "You're putting them in a cage," Soo-jin said, eyes burning. "No," Park replied, stepping back. "We're making sure they stay in the one they've already been placed in." The men left. Min-ho didn't move until the sound of the car disappeared down the road. Soo-jin walked back into the house slowly. She leaned against the wall, exhaled, and finally let the tears fall. "They're trying to take them," she whispered. "They won't," Min-ho said. She looked at him, eyes glistening. "You don't know that." "I do," he said, "because I'll fight them. In every court. On every paper. I'll give my name, my history, my empire, whatever it takes." "You already gave them your name once," she murmured. Then walked away. He didn't answer that. He couldn't. But she wasn't finished. "You want to fix it, Min-ho? Then stand still. Don't run to lawyers or conferences or press statements. Stay here. Sit beside them. Eat with them. Read to them. Let them know you're not going anywhere. Not because of guilt, but because of love." "I do love them," he said, voice cracking. She stepped closer, pressing her hand to his chest. "Then show them. Not the world. Not me. Them." A sob escaped him before he could swallow it back. He grabbed her hand and held it against his heart. "I'll do it. I swear to you. I'll stay until they don't remember what it felt like to be left." In the other room, Minacio called out sleepily, "Appa." Both froze. Min-ho's breath caught in his throat. He turned slowly, and there, standing in the hallway, was Minacio in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Can I have more pancakes?" Min-ho nodded, unable to speak. The boy looked at him again. "Are you crying?" Soo-jin walked over and scooped him into her arms. Min-ho wiped his eyes quickly. "No, buddy. Just a little dust." Minacio nestled into her neck, whispering, "It's okay. I cry sometimes too." Min-ho smiled through the ache. "Yeah," he whispered. "Me too." And as Soo-jin walked into the kitchen, humming softly, Min-ho followed. The kind of quiet that crept beneath the skin and made even the sound of breathing feel loud. Soo-jin sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the folded stack of paperwork the social worker had handed them. Legal language, court terms, deadlines. All of it felt like a maze, a trap wrapped in formality. She was trying not to panic. She had promised herself she wouldn't. But every word on those pages screamed the same thing. They could take them away. A soft knock came from her door. Gentle, hesitant. She didn't answer right away. But after a moment, it opened slowly. Min-ho stood there, barefoot, wearing a simple sweater and old jeans. The first time she had seen him in something so plain, so human. In his hands was a folder. Not glossy, not press-worthy, just plain manila. "I found it," he said quietly. She looked up, confused. "Found what?" He stepped in, holding it out. "My mother kept it," he said. "In her old study. I had it retrieved today." She opened the folder slowly. Inside were birth records. 3, each with her name, each missing a father. And tucked behind them a letter, dated 5 years ago, to him. She looked at it with trembling hands. "You never saw this?" He shook his head. "No, I never even knew she sent it. I had already shut everything out by then, including you." Sujin opened the letter slowly. The paper was creased and stained with age. "Min-ho, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep waiting for you to come back. But you should know they exist. They're yours. All 3. I wasn't going to tell you. I was afraid. But I thought maybe if you had this, someday you'd come looking. Not for me. For them. Love, Sujin." She couldn't breathe. She pressed the letter to her chest. And for a long time, neither of them spoke. Min-ho sat beside her slowly, not touching, not pressing. Just there. "I want to register them tomorrow," he said softly. "Legally. Completely. My name. My signature. Their place in my family. And yours." She lowered the letter. "It's not that simple." "I know," he said. "But it's a start." Her voice cracked. "What if we're too late?" He shook his head. "We're not. They're still here. And they still believe in us. That's enough." She looked down at the letter again. "I wrote this the night I gave birth. Alone. I remember sitting in that hospital bed, trying to decide if it was worth sending. Part of me thought you'd laugh if you ever read it. I would have cried," he whispered, "like I am now." She looked up. His eyes were wet. "Honest. I can't go back to who we were," she said. "I don't want to," he answered. "I want to be the father they see. The man you deserved." Her hands trembled as she folded the letter and placed it back inside. "I'm scared, Min-ho. I am too." She turned to him, searching his face. "If they come for us, if this turns into something bigger, you might lose your reputation. Everything you've built." He reached for her hand, held it gently. "Then I'll build something else. With you. With them. With truth." A long silence passed between them, the kind that doesn't ask for words. Then, from down the hallway, a whimper. She stood instantly. "Minesio." They both rushed into the small room where the boys slept. Minesio was curled into himself, whimpering. His hands clenched tightly around the blankets. Sujin sat on the edge of the bed and gently stroked his hair. "Bad dream?" she whispered. He nodded, eyes still closed. Min-ho crouched beside him. "It's okay, buddy. It was just a dream." Minesio opened his eyes slowly. "Were they gonna take us away?" Sujin froze. Min-ho reached for the boy's tiny hand. "No one's taking you." "But the men, they said stuff. I heard them." Min-ho's voice shook. "They don't understand. But we do. And we're going to stay together. All of us." Minesio stared at him. "Even you?" "Yes," Min-ho said. "Especially me." Minesio slowly sat up and crawled into Min-ho's lap. "Can I sleep here?" Min-ho nodded, his arms wrapping protectively around his son. "You can sleep wherever I am." Sujin watched them, hand pressed to her mouth to keep from breaking. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. But inside, he had barely slept. Sujin had insisted on staying with the boys at home. They don't need to see cameras or lawyers. They need breakfast and peace. And so he had come alone. His hands were buried in the pockets of his coat, but they trembled anyway. Around him, reporters waited behind the designated line, their cameras like vultures watching for weakness. Flashbulbs clicked. Questions were shouted. "Chairman Kong, is it true you fathered 3 children in secret? Is this your way of stepping down from your company? Is Han Sujin seeking financial compensation?" He said nothing. Not to them. Not today. Inside, the air was cold and clinical, a different kind of battlefield. The hallway echoed beneath his shoes as he approached the registrar's office. the envelope of documents tucked beneath his arm like a shield. When the door opened, the clerk looked up, startled. "Ah, Chairman Kong." Minho nodded politely and placed the envelope on the counter. "I'm here to correct a mistake." The clerk flipped through the documents slowly. "You're filing full parental recognition?" "Yes, for all 3 children, retroactively, and I want their names officially listed in the family register under mine." The man looked up, surprised. "You understand this makes them legal heirs?" "I understand. And you're aware that this will be public record?" "Yes." There was a beat of silence. Then the man leaned back in his chair. "May I ask why now?" Minho's voice was soft, but firm. "Because no empire is worth building if it stands on top of absence." The clerk studied him for a moment, then nodded. "It will take a few days for processing, but we'll begin immediately." Minho bowed once, respectfully, then turned to leave. As he stepped out into the hall, his phone buzzed. A message from Sujin. One photo. The boys, huddled under a blanket fort in the living room, holding up signs made with crayon. "We're waiting for you, Appa." He closed his eyes, breath trembling. He had waited years to hear that word. Now it was real, and it changed everything. Back at the house, Sujin was folding laundry when she heard the front door open. She looked up just in time to see Minho step inside, soaked from a sudden rain. His eyes met hers across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. She set the clothes down. "How did it go?" He exhaled. "They're ours. Officially. Legally." Her hand flew to her mouth, her knees nearly giving out. "They have your name now?" she whispered. "They've always had it," he replied. "Now the world just knows it too." She walked toward him slowly. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing the tremble in his hands. "I don't know," he admitted. "It doesn't feel like victory. Feels like breath. Like I haven't taken a real one in 5 years." She reached up, gently brushing the rain from his hair. "That's because you were holding it." He laughed quietly, sadly. "I thought I'd feel strong after today," he said. "But I just feel small." "That's what love does," she said. "It doesn't make you bigger. It makes you honest." There was silence for a long moment. Then, Minho reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. She stared at it. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly, voice trembling. "Not yet. I know we're not there. I know I haven't earned that." She looked up at him, heart pounding. He opened the box. Inside were 3 silver rings. Not for her. For them. Tiny, perfectly sized. "I want them to wear these," he whispered. "Not as a brand, but as a promise. That I see them. That I'll never let them feel forgotten again." Sujin blinked back the tears. "And if one day," he continued, voice almost breaking, "if one day you wear yours too, it won't be because I asked. It'll be because you believed in me again." She reached out, touched the rings, then his hand. "I see you now," she said. "Not the man in the magazines. Not the tycoon." He held her gaze. "You're the man who came back." A soft voice echoed down the hallway. "Iyama." They both turned. Hyun stood there, eyes wide. "Are you crying?" Sujin wiped her face quickly. "Just a little." "Is it because Appa did something again?" Jiho called from behind him. Minho smiled and stepped forward, crouching low. "Actually," he said, pulling out the little box. "This time I did something right." He opened it. The boys gathered around. "What are those?" Minacio asked, curious. "They're promises," Minho said. "One for each of you." Jiho lit up. "Do we get to wear them now?" "If you want." Hyun reached for his first. "Does this mean you're really our dad now?" Minho's voice trembled. "Yes, in every way." Sujin stood back, watching them, all of them, together in a circle on the floor. Not broken, not perfect. Minho sat at the head of the table now. Not as a guest, not as a stranger, as a father. He listened to every word the boys said, laughed when Jiho told his wild stories, gently corrected Minecio's grip on chopsticks, and silently wiped Hyun's mouth when he pretended to be too old to care. It was domestic, gentle. It was everything Soo-jin had ever wanted. And that's what terrified her. She stepped out onto the porch to clear her head, wrapping a cardigan around her arms as the wind tugged at her hair. The night had a weight to it, a warning. The screen door creaked behind her. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. "She's going to retaliate," she said softly. Min-ho stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Nare, she won't let this go quietly. I know." She filed the report. "I know it was her. The timing, the language. She's using the system to punish you." "No," he said gently. "She's using it to punish you." Soo-jin looked at him now, her eyes filled with something old. Not fear exactly, but exhaustion. That kind of deep, bone-heavy weariness that only a woman who survived too many storms could carry. "I can take it," she said. "I've taken worse." "But they haven't," he replied. "The boys don't know how cruel the world can be yet." She turned back to the wind. "Then we have to make sure they don't learn it too early." Min-ho reached into his coat, pulling out a small folded envelope. "The lawyer called. We need to testify." She blinked. "In court." He nodded. "There's going to be a hearing. They want to assess domestic stability." Soo-jin laughed under her breath. "Bitter, tight. That's rich. We spent 5 years hiding, surviving, keeping the kids fed and safe and happy, and now we have to prove to strangers that we're stable." "They don't see that," Min-ho said. "All they see is a high-profile scandal and 3 kids with no legal history." "What if they don't believe us?" she asked. "We tell the truth," he said. "That I failed. That you didn't. That this—" He gestured toward the house behind them, where the boys' voices echoed through the windows. "This is real, and we're not going to lose it." She looked at him again. Really looked, and something in her eyes flickered. Pain, yes, but something more dangerous. "Hope. I'm not good at courts, Min-ho," she whispered. "I'm not eloquent. I panic when I'm questioned." "Then let them question me. They'll dig into everything," she said. "The old accusations, the affair, the divorce, my silence. I'll take the fall," he said. "For all of it. I spent 5 years with power and comfort. Let me finally use it for something that matters." A silence fell between them, thick with emotion. She reached out, placing her hand on his wrist. "You could walk away from all this. You could disappear again. Nare would take you back. The media would spin it." "I don't want her," he said, voice low. "And I don't want the spin." His hand turned under hers, their fingers intertwining. "I want the sound of Jiho's laugh. I want Mineseo falling asleep on my chest. I want Hyun rolling his eyes when I make terrible jokes." He paused. "I want you, even if it takes years to earn your trust again." Her breath caught, and then the porch light flickered. Mineseo's small voice came through the door. "Yama? Appa? It's story time." Soo-jin let go of his hand slowly. "I'll make tea," she said. "I'll read them the paper fox again," he replied, smiling. "They never get tired of it." She nodded once. Then she looked back at him, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "If they take us to court—" "They won't," he said. "But if they do," she continued, "promise me you won't turn this into a war. Promise me you'll protect their peace, not your pride." Min-ho looked her straight in the eyes. "I swear it." He stepped inside, the warmth of the house embracing him instantly. Soo-jin lingered a moment longer on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, staring into the night. She had been running for so long. He sat beside Soo-jin at the long table, dressed simply in a charcoal suit. Not designer, not tailored to impress. Just a man, stripped of title, standing before judgment. Soo-jin held herself with quiet dignity. Her hands rested folded in her lap, but Min-ho noticed how tightly her fingers were pressed together. Her knuckles were white. She hadn't spoken since they left the house. The boys weren't there. The court had ruled it unnecessary, too disruptive for minors. But it was them he kept thinking about. the image of their little hands waving goodbye that morning. Jiho's whispered, "Appa, will you win?" He didn't know what to tell him. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then silence fell again. A woman from child welfare spoke first. She read off a timeline. Dates, names, absences, accusations. Neutral but laced with implication. Minho listened to every word like a blade. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. Sujin did. Then it was her turn. "Ms. Han," the judge said, "you've been raising 3 children independently, outside of legal registration, for nearly 6 years. Do you understand how serious that is?" "Yes," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "I do. Why did you never seek legal guardianship or support?" "Because I was protecting them," she said. "From questions they were too young to answer. From being pawns in someone else's version of the truth." "And you didn't believe their father would help?" Sujin paused. "I believed he was gone." Minho closed his eyes briefly. That truth was heavier than any verdict. The judge nodded slowly, turning toward him now. "Mr. Kong," he straightened, "you are a public figure, powerful one. Until recently, you denied knowledge of your sons. Would you like to clarify your position?" "Yes," he said. "I didn't know. I should have. But I chose ignorance because it was easier. I buried the woman I once loved in silence. And when she disappeared, I assumed it was final." He glanced at Sujin. Her eyes were down. "But it wasn't," he continued. "She raised them. She gave them everything I failed to. And I'm not here to claim rights. I'm here to accept responsibility." The judge lifted a brow. "Responsibility in what form?" "By giving them my name, my protection, my home, my time, whatever they ask of me." There was a pause. Then the opposing attorney stood. "I'd like to remind the court that Mr. Kang's public reputation and the current media attention may endanger the boys' psychological stability. Their lives have been kept private. Suddenly introducing them to national headlines could be damaging." Minho cut in. "Then let me step out of the headlines." All eyes turned to him. "If this court believes my presence puts them in harm's way, I'll relinquish public roles. I'll resign from my board positions. I'll withdraw from the foundation. I'll disappear if it means they're safe." Gasps echoed behind them. Reporters, lawyers, even the clerk flinched. Sujin turned to him, stunned. "Minho." He met her gaze, voice breaking. "I would give up everything before I ever lose them again." The judge sat back. The silence that followed was thick and fragile, like breath held too long. Sujin's voice cut through it. "Your Honor," she said, standing now, "I didn't bring these boys into the world to fight for them in court. I brought them into the world to love them. If I have to do that alone, I will. I always have. But now they finally know who their father is." She looked at Minho. "They know the sound of his voice. They know the shape of his arms when they're scared. They've stopped calling him a juicy, and they call him Appa. That wasn't taught. That was earned." Minho felt his throat close. The judge sat still for a long moment, then finally spoke. "We will take all testimony into account and deliver our decision within the week." Court adjourned. The gavel fell, and just like that, it was over. Or so it seemed. Sujin grabbed her bag slowly. Minho turned to her, breath shallow. "Do you think we did enough?" "I don't know," she said, but her hand found his, fingers slipping between his like it was second nature. "You were brave," she whispered, "for them, not for the court." He squeezed her hand back. "I'm not scared of losing anymore," he said. "I'm scared of being forgiven." She looked at him. "Then learn to receive it," she said softly. "The way they give it, freely, quietly, with full hearts." Outside, the crowd waited. Cameras, questions, flashbulbs. Minho looked at her. She nodded. Together, hand in hand, they stepped through the courthouse doors. Not because everything was certain. Minho watched her from the kitchen, drying the last dish with deliberate care, waiting. His breath caught somewhere between fear and hope. She turned slowly, eyes wide. "It's the judge's office," she mouthed. He set the towel down. A silence stretched long enough to crush him. Then Sujin's eyes filled with tears, but her lips broke into a small, trembling smile. She hung up. "They approved it," she said. He blinked. "What?" "The court," she whispered. "They approved the petition. Full recognition. Full custody. Joint guardianship." Her voice broke. "We're a family. Legally. Officially. They're ours." Minho's knees nearly buckled as he stumbled forward, wrapping her in his arms. Her face buried into his chest, his hands in her hair, their bodies shaking in the quiet, raw relief that flooded them both. He pulled back just enough to see her face. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "We did." A small voice interrupted them. "Yama? Appa?" They turned. Hyun stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. "Are you crying again?" Minho laughed through the tears. "This time it's a good cry." Sujin opened her arms and Hyun ran into them. Jiho and Minaseo followed, all three wrapping themselves around their parents like vines claiming what was already theirs. Minho crouched down, holding all three tightly. "Do we have to move again?" Jiho asked softly. "No," Sujin said. "No more moving. No more hiding?" Minaseo whispered. "Never again," Minho replied. Hyun tilted his head. "Even if people talk about us?" "They will," Minho said honestly. "But we'll talk louder, with our lives, with how we love each other. That's what people will remember." He looked around the room. The cluttered toys, the soft lamplight, the warm scent of dinner still lingering in the air. All the things he once never thought he deserved. "Can we celebrate?" Jiho asked excitedly. "Like with cake?" Sujin laughed. "We don't have cake." "I can bake," Minho offered. "Kind of. You can burn toast," she teased, nudging him. "But I can try," he grinned. "Isn't that what fathers do?" Hyun handed him a drawing, something he'd clearly been working on all day. It was the five of them, standing in front of a small house with crooked windows and a big sun overhead. The words written in shaky handwriting. "Thanks for coming back, Appa." Minho's hand flew to his mouth. His voice cracked. "I didn't know what I was missing," he whispered. Sujin touched his shoulder gently. "Now you do." They spent the evening making a mess in the kitchen, laughing as Jiho got flour in his hair and Minaseo licked the bowl before the batter made it to the pan. The cake came out uneven, slightly burned around the edges, but it was perfect. They sat cross-legged on the floor with mismatched plates, sharing slices too big and icing too sweet. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep in a pile of limbs and stuffed animals, Minho stepped out onto the porch. The stars blinked above like silent witnesses. Sujin joined him, her cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. He didn't say anything at first. Then, softly, "I used to think legacy meant buildings, companies, my name on glass towers. And now?" she asked. He took her hand. "Now I think it's three boys asleep inside, with your strength in their hearts and my name on their papers." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And me?" she asked. He turned to her, eyes warm. "You're the reason I even have a second chance to try." A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The night was calm, finally. But more than that, it was theirs. And though the world outside might never stop whispering their names with judgment or